Before we get started, I'd like to thank the Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago for tolerating me for yet another year in preparing these slides. As Dr. Gopal said, I'll just focus on psychological first aid. And I should share with you that this came out of the World Federation for Mental Health, which celebrates World Mental Health Day throughout the years on October the 10th. And for this year, the theme was really dignity in mental health first aid and psychological first aid for all. So it was in 1947 the first Director General of the World Health Organization, that's George Brock Chisholm, a Canadian psychiatrist who had suggested that the World Federation of Mental Health be created. He envisioned the World Federation of Mental Health as an international non-governmental body to provide link to grassroots mental health organizations and the United Nations. He was a radical thinker, saying that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And he provided early direction for both WHO and MH. His close friend for many years, Dr. John Rawlins Rees, was at that time a British military psychiatrist and founder of the renowned Tavistock Clinic. And he got Dr. Rees to accept the first presidency of the World Federation for Mental Health in 1948. The aims of this organization includes the prevention of mental and emotional disorders, the proper treatment and care of those with such disorders, and the promotion of mental health. The annual themes you see have been coming out since 1992 and 93, taking us up through the years to what we have today, 2016, Dignity in Mental Health, Psychological and Mental Health First Aid for All. Now, this psychological first aid, mental health first aid does give some training in how to respond to a person who has experienced a traumatic event. However, this training is much less detailed than psychological first aid. In Australia, for example, where a considerable amount of work has been done and where there are a lot of specialization in psychological first aid, psychological first aid is often given by people with some specialist mental health training. Mental health first aid training is designed basically in that setting for non-health professionals. By 2009, WHO Mental Health Gap Guideline Development Group evaluated the evidence for psychological first aid and psychological debriefing. It concluded that psychological first aid rather than psychological debriefing should be offered to people in severe distress after recent exposure to potentially traumatic event. In a meta-analysis of a comprehensive review of studies, they advised that caution against the use of individual psychological debriefing after exposure to traumatic events has fueled the popularity of psychological first aid. By 2011, WHO, together with partners, released its own field manual of psychological first aid, followed by a guide for capacity building of countries. Psychological first aid is very different from psychological debriefing in that it does not necessarily involve a discussion of the event that caused the distress. Support based on the principles of psychological first aid is a form of support that may be delivered by professionals, non-professionals alike, after a brief orientation of less than a day. Psychological first aid was developed as a principal tool to use after an emergency, disaster, or other disruptive event. It now constitutes a crucial aspect of responding and recovering from a disruptive event. Psychological first aid is an evidence-informed modular means of providing psychosocial support to individuals and families immediately after a disaster. It consists of a set of helping actions which are systematically undertaken in order to reduce initial post-trauma distress and to support short and long-term adaptive functioning and coping. Based on the principle of do no harm, it is provided increasingly by members of the general population, although mental health professionals are almost always involved. Psychological first aid includes basic common sense principles to promote normal recovery. These are actions to help people feel safe, calm, connected to others, hopeful, and empowered to help themselves with access to physical resources and emotional and social support. If there's one thing I wish you could remember, would be this message, this particular slide. Psychological first aid helps survivors to meet current needs. It promotes flexible coping and it encourages adjustment. It is called first aid because it is the first thing that helpers might think to offer disaster-affected people, and it commonly occurs in the first days, weeks, and months after a disaster or other emergency. The principles and actions of psychological first aid meet 4 basic standards. They are consistent with research evidence on risk and resilience following a trauma, that is evidence-informed, applicable and practical in field setting as opposed to a medical or health professional office, appropriate for developmental levels across the lifespan, culturally informed and delivered in a flexible means as is often offered by members of the same community as the supported individuals. This is community-based, and the programs are usually developed in consultation with targeted community, with support being provided by members of that community. This tends to make it culturally responsive. It is low cost, with the chief expenses of being those of developing the training and public education materials. Being culturally sensitive and low cost makes it sustainable. Because psychological first aid programs incorporate the traditional coping strategies of the community for which they are developed, they tend to build on the strength of the culture. The programs build the response capacity of people who, in a disaster, will be the family and friends of the survivors. Appropriately, they will be the ones to whom survivors and those affected most often by the psychological support. PFA can be implemented other than mental health professionals. The core skills is active listening, the skill at the heart of most therapeutic techniques, but also the first learned skill in any interpersonal communication skills program. Participants in PFA programs report that gaining a listening skill improves not only their psychological supporting, but also their personal and professional relationships and communication. So the elements of psychological first aid basically are to promote safety, calm, connectedness, self-efficacy and group efficacy, and hope. What we mean by promote safety, it's examples like remove from or reduce exposure to threat of harm, help people meet basic needs for food, water, shelter, financial and material assistance, help people obtain emergency medical attention, and provide physical and emotional comfort. It stabilizes people who are overwhelmed or disoriented, provide an environment as far as practical, remove from the stressful situations or exposure to sights and sounds and smells of the emergency. It also promotes listening to people who wish to share their stories and emotions without forcing them to talk. Remember that there is no right or wrong way to feel. We are advised to be friendly and compassionate even if people are being difficult, offer accurate information about the disaster or trauma, and the relief efforts underway to help survivors understand the situation. We have to provide information on stress and coping, and when they express fear or worry, remind people, if you know, that more help and services are on the way. It promotes connectedness. It will help people contact friends and loved ones, keep families together, keep children with parents and other close relatives wherever possible. It will help establish contacts with support people, friends, family or community helping resources. Connectedness obliges us to respect cultural norms regarding gender, age, and family structures. It mandates us to offer practical help to people to address immediate needs and concerns, provide information and direct people to those services that are available, and to link people with available services. It wants us to respect cultural norms regarding gender, age, family structures, and religion. And what we mean by promote self-efficacy, it engages people in meeting their own needs. It assists with decision-making and helping them to prioritize their problems. It conveys expectancy that people will recover, be there and be willing to help, and reassure people that their feelings are normal. Mental health and disaster response experts assert that most people are resilient enough, especially if they are given psychosocial support in the immediate aftermath of a disruptive event, that they will eventually go back to normal without additional specialized mental health intervention, such as long-term counseling or psychiatric services. Yet despite a widely recognized need to provide immediate help for trauma survivors, there is limited research consensus about how best to assist individuals during the first hours or days after the experiences. The field of disaster relief has continued to be plagued by difficulties investigating the question of what intervention is best. Certainly, there has always been the controversy with interventions. To whom should it be offered? Survivors alone, affected families, the responders who witnessed terrible sights in the course of rescuing people, and should people be made to talk about their experiences or merely invited? Psychological first aid should be delivered by appropriate agencies as part of the state, regional, district, or in a local emergency management plans. In various countries of the world, psychological first aid has been incorporated into disaster preparedness plans. I'm thinking to fast forward just a little bit, and Dr. Othello agrees with me, so I should cooperate. Right. Okay, so where can PFA be delivered? Psychological first aid can be delivered at the scene of the emergency or at places where affected people gather, such as that list, if you can really speed read. Okay. Now, the WHO has developed a framework consisting of 3 action principles, yes, to assist in the delivery of psychological first aid. These principles provide guidance for how to view and safely enter an emergency situation. Look at the 3 words: look, listen, and link. Oh yes, I just have a slide. You can just gaze at it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds forward. And then when you're looking, you check for safety, what changes you can observe: a damaged road, unstable buildings, fire proceedings. I'm not going to go too much. Questions? Okay, no, we don't need to ask that. Listening asks us to approach people who may need support. Approach people respectfully and according to their cultural norms. Introduce yourself by name and organization. Ask if you can provide help, and if possible, find a quiet place. I'm going to go again. Listen. I think they're asking us as psychological first aiders, stay close to the person. Do not pressure the person to talk. Listen in case they may want to talk about what happens. If they are very distressed, help them to feel calm and try to make sure they are not alone. Well, the link looks merely at helping them link to the agencies that can provide food, shelter, and material needs. Be honest. Yes, I'm coming right now. The link asks us to connect people with loved ones and social support. And the last line: if prayer or religious practice is important, people may benefit from being linked to their spiritual base. Disclosures, community members. Yeah, okay, I just want to get something else. Oh, there's the same elements: safety, calmness, self-efficacy, connectedness, and hope. Psychological first aid, because of its scalability, is now the most implemented form of mental health support in large humanitarian crises, such as today in Syria, last year during the Ebola epidemic in Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone, and after the earthquake in Nepal, and currently during the refugee crisis in Europe. So I probably could get the slides to you for a small fee, of course. Okay, the last thing I perhaps should say is that I wish we could get governmental support to begin to include psychological first aid, if not at the level of the local government, and there are 14 municipal region corporations, at least in each of the 8 counties under the CMOH. So I think that's the main message. Thank you.